Hello and welcome to Useful Idiots Monday Morning, where we react to the Sunday morning news shows that we watch so that you don't have to. And I am Katie Halper.
And I'm Aaron Maté. Happy Monday morning.
Happy Monday morning. Yeah. Just retweeting this out and we're live. Also, make sure that you, of course, I hate having to tell you guys this, but obviously, as Aaron pointed out yesterday, we have some news, which can only mean one thing. We'll get to it later. And it means that, as Aaron wrote, our corporate overlords are plotting to deprive useful idiots of our best Monday morning material. We will not be deterred. And a way that you can help us not be deterred is by pushing back against that and giving us a like.
There is a very big development in the Monday morning universe, and we will bring it to you.
Yeah.
But yes, we will not be deterred. It's clearly a sign of an all-out war against useful idiots on Monday morning to try to deprive us of prime material, but we will not be deterred. And we are showing that today with our resilience in this broadcast. And you can help send a message of deterrence by liking this stream. That's all you got to do.
Engage in deterrence, guys. Be part of our war of deterrence. Yeah. You know, a lot of people would have taken today off. They would have been really sad. Mm-hmm. They would have been shocked. They would have been speechless. But that's not our style. We are here for you. We are here for the people. And so we decided, you know, there was a lot of processing that we did, a lot of questioning, kind of not just of what we should do, but on the show, but how to kind of live in this world, this post CT world. And we'll get to that at the end of the stream. We want to make sure that we're all together and gathered, and we've enjoyed the stream. We don't want to ruin the stream for you by giving you this shocking news at the beginning. So we're going to work up to it.
It would ruin the whole show. So we'll save it till the end.
Ruin the whole show. Yeah. We'll save it to the end where we can process together. Yeah.
But here's a little tease. Here's a little tease of what it might entail. Let's go to the Chuckster, Chuck Todd.
And you better enjoy it while he's here. A little foreshadowing.
Rare happened in Washington this week. Both Democrats and Republicans declared victory after voting for the same exact bill. Of course, not every Democrat or Republican is happy about that bill, and that's kind of the point. Both sides had to make concessions. It's called compromise. It's what politics is supposed to be, the art of the possible. President Biden, who is constantly underestimated politically, did what he promised.
Hold on one second. We have to start at the very beginning of this clip for first part of it to make sense. Okay.
Good Sunday morning. Something rare happened in Washington this week. Both Democrats and Republicans declared victory after voting for the same exact bill. Of course, not every Democrat.
How is that rare? That's just called political opportunism. How is it rare that both sides of something, of a negotiation, declare victory?
Fair enough. Yeah.
He's like, breaking news, in a very rare move, both Republicans and Democrats bring you a shitty bill and pretend that it's good news for them and the country. Wow. Wow. What's that kind of insight and astute insight that Chuck Todd is just hones in on.
Democrat or Republican is happy about that bill, and that's kind of the point. Both sides had to make concessions. It's called compromise.
Is this glitchy for you, Aaron, or just me?
This is
promised he came into office. He secured
Wilson, you see there, it's not only the court. This is what they're trying to throttle us. Wilson, do you want to refresh your Wi-Fi? Your browser. Yeah, let's see if this works. It is glitchy. Yeah. Look, we told you they're trying to deter us.
All right, this is not good. All right, let me see.
War.
Let me see if
we can play it.
Playing it, yeah. But yes, this is really a sign of what we're up against right now. We're being deprived of content. We're being deprived of
Wi-Fi.
I mean, really, someone up there is coming after us, Katie.
Yeah.
So anyway, let's see for now if we can fix this by sharing this ourselves while Wilson addresses his.
And thank you, Linda, for that very generous super sticker.
Both Democrats and Republicans declared victory after voting for the same exact bill. Of course, not every Democrat or Republican is happy about that bill, and that's kind of the point. Both sides had to make concessions. It's called compromise. It's what politics is supposed to be, the art of the possible. President Biden, who is constantly underestimated politically, did what he promised he would do when he came into office. He secured a bipartisan agreement when gridlock have ruled the day.
So this is just straight up like pro-Biden propaganda. He delivers this like it's the news, and he goes, well, Biden, who is constantly underestimated. What do you really think, Chuck?
Yeah, and of course they have the shot of him with the aviators and strolling down the White House lawn. Yeah, absolutely. And it gets worse.
As a candidate in 2019, Biden predicted Republicans would have a post-Trump epiphany.
The thing that will fundamentally change things is with Donald Trump out of the White House. Not a joke. You will see an epiphany occur among many of my Republican friends.
And while epiphany may be a strong word, Republicans haven't exactly stopped embracing former President Donald Trump. But Biden does seem aware of the deal he cut with swing voters. He's tried to bridge the divide when it was possible. And his bipartisan list of accomplishments are starting to stack up, from the infrastructure bill to the Chips and Science Act to even gun safety legislation protecting same-sex marriage. It is also notable that President Biden praised House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who emerged stronger this week after also being constantly underestimated politically. McCarthy managed to use the threat of a debt default and the leverage of his razor-thin majority to force the White House to negotiate a deal. And more than 2/3 of House Republicans agreed to it. He didn't lose his speakership, even though 71 Republicans didn't sign on to the deal. And at least one Republican, Congressman Chip Roy, who of course was a skeptic of McCarthy as speaker, called it a turd sandwich. In the end, more Democrats.
Okay, a turd sandwich. That's an interesting critique to highlight.
Yeah.
Do you think they're going to get to the part where the main bipartisan agreement here was around cutting access to food stamps for low-income people? Like, that's the centerpiece of this whole thing. That's what they agreed on. Like, they agreed to not touch military spending because that's a top priority for both parties. So the Pentagon gets its gargantuan budget. That's unscathed. But they did agree on coming together to make it harder for people to get food stamps so that, you know, work requirements are tougher. And they also agreed to cut money from the IRS, which will, you know, I know conservatives hate the IRS. But it also probably means that there'll be less revenue for the government because there's less people working on collecting revenue. So
and there's also going to be less overview of fraud, like
fraud,
cheating,
and
tax cheating,
which helps the wealthy primarily.
Right. No, imagine all the opportunities these people could have had to cover what impact this will have on student loan debt, because that's another thing that has a major impact with this turd sandwich. It is a turd sandwich, but not for the reasons that Chip Roy is saying it's a turd sandwich. Although maybe he objects to the military spending, so I'd agree with that. But that being turdish. But no, they don't bring any reporting. I mean, it's amazing. It's just all horse race politics, and it's no substantive reporting on what this will actually mean for people.
And you can see how happy Chuck is with this, because this perpetuates the myth of like the moderate middle, where the middle ground is just everybody coming together to defend corporate power and protect the Pentagon budget and cut social programs for low-income people. That, to Chuck, is like the ultimate in bipartisan compromise. So it's almost like Chuck's work here is done.
Yeah, no wonder he's
well. I'm just saying.
Right, it's almost as if he could, if he wanted to.
Yeah, right off into the sunset.
Into that sunset. Yeah.
Then Republicans voted to pass the bill in both chambers. In fact, because of the defense cuts that were proposed in it, only 17 Republicans voted in favor of the bill in the Senate.
To my House colleagues, I can't believe you did this. To the Speaker, I know you got a tough job. I like you, but the party of Ronald Reagan is dying.
But what did
I like the way he says, I like you.
I like you.
Like, don't worry. We're cool personally. Like
Yeah.
I'll invite you to my birthday party.
I like you. I like you.
I mean,
What
imagine
is he
if they
so
report.
what is he
Sorry,
mad
yeah.
about, by the way? Like, what is Lindsey Graham mad about? They kept the Pentagon budget, they kept the tax cuts for the wealthy, they're going after low income people. For him, like, what's not to like?
I thought he was mad at the ones who didn't vote for it.
It sounds like no, he's mad at McCarthy. He's saying, "I like you, McCarthy, but
Oh
this
yeah,
is not
you're right.
cool.
That's
This is
good.
not cool."
I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
You're right. I wonder what he is mad about. Maybe not enough for
Didn't happen.
Ukraine or something. He wants some added stuff.
He wanted more for Ukraine.
Yeah.
And it's also worth noting. Republicans didn't destroy the economy. Progressive Democrats didn't tank this deal. Republicans didn't destroy the Biden agenda. And
There's Chuck patting progressives on the head for not holding out to protect all
Right.
the social programs they could. Good job. Good job.
Right. Yeah. It was over defense spending, by the way, I think. Well, that was what he was mad about. Sorry, I'm looking at the Lindsey Graham thing.
Oh, so Lindsey Graham wants an increase on the Pentagon budget.
Yeah.
He's not happy that it stayed at its current level of
Yeah.
gazillions of dollars. Okay. All right. He wants even more.
And yeah. Also, another thing that they're not talking about that you'd think that they would just talk about at all, like just mention, is the MVP, the Mountain, not the most valuable player, but the Mountain Valley pipeline, which they also built into it.
Yes, and that was the pet project of Joe Manchin,
Right.
Mr. Moderate, Mr. Compromise, who's
Right.
really a extreme centrist who serves corporate power. So he of course got what he wanted because, for some reason he always gets whatever he wants.
Right. And yeah, it really is incredible. And of course, it's not a Meet the Press or Face the Nation or Sunday morning news show if Joe Manchin isn't on and asked if he's going to run for president.
Yes, we'll get to that.
House Republicans didn't get rid of Kevin McCarthy. They walked away with a pretty modest $1.5 trillion in projected savings, and that's on the most optimistic end of the spectrum. So with the threat of default now gone until the next election, President Biden believes he has an accomplishment he can now run on in 2024.
I know bipartisanship is hard and unity is hard, but we can never stop trying. Because in moments like this one, the ones we just faced, where the American economy and the world economy is at risk of collapsing, there's no other way.
Well, that was touching. And you can tell that Chuck Todd has just been moved to tears. And what a big week this was for him. But yeah, no mention at all in that recap of, making it harder for working people to get access to food aid. So
Right.
Great job there by Chuck doing his job.
It's almost like Chuck doesn't care and won't be affected and is out of touch. Yeah.
Okay, well, I think we have Wilson back. Let's see if this next clip works. Here is Joe Biden's former spokesperson, Jen Psaki, who now hosts a show on MSNBC, and I'm sure she'll be bringing up that Joe Biden just agreed to cut food aid to low-income people. I'm sure we'll be getting some hard-hitting
I'm sure she's going to bring up the food aid. I'm sure she's going to bring up the environmental impact, and I'm sure she's going to bring up the student loan impact. So let's hear what she has to say.
Yeah.
At the outset here that when it comes to our politics, I want to return to some version of normal as much as all of you. I also don't think compromise should be treated as a dirty word. That's often how you get things done. But the events of this week should not lull you into a sense of comfort that we're on our way back to normalcy and bipartisanship. I wish I had a different take on this, but that's the truth, having spent a lot of time in this town. Let me put it to you another way. If someone took a bunch of innocent people hostage, let's call that hostage taker Kevin, just for the sake of this example, and someone else negotiated to get them released, those hostages released, let's call that negotiator Joe, just for the sake of this example, of course, would a lead like Kevin and Joe work collaboratively to release hostages, a sign of finding common ground and a promise of things to come, make any sense at all? No, it would not.
I got it. So Kevin is the bad guy.
And
Joe,
by the way, Kevin, I think she's not naming him last name, but I think she means Kevin McCarthy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And Joe, meanwhile, is the do-gooder who just wants to rescue the hostages. And
He's
that's
basically
all he
Keanu
cares
Reeves
about.
in Speed.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And Kevin McCarthy is Dennis Hopper.
Thing. And I think you've caught on by now to who Kevin and Joe are. So, no, the debt limit deal struck between Speaker McCarthy and President Biden is not a sign that Washington is functioning again. I wish it was. Yes, we've avoided default and economic catastrophe without too many terrible things in the final deal. Yay for us. But the fact that the country came close to defaulting before a majority of Congress voted to prevent that from happening with a deal, which, by the way, included crowning achievements like less money going after people who cheat on their taxes, is not exactly a victory for the history books. And we shouldn't treat it that way. On Friday night, President Biden.
And by the way, they were never going to default. I mean, it's like the rich donors are the people who own that debt. And neither party was going to alienate them. But anyway.
And said this was a big win for bipartisanship. I get it. That's his campaign message. That's how he won in part in 2020. He has to say that. And also, he very much believes it and believes in bipartisanship and compromise. That's a good thing. But bipartisanship working again is not my takeaway from last week. So let me tell you what is. Joe Biden was once again underestimated. Again. His strategy and the strategy of his team were once again questioned. And once.
Shocker. The takeaway of Biden's former spokesperson is that we shouldn't underestimate Joe Biden. Wow. That is, this is some hard-hitting analysis here.
And we know it's true because truth tellers and objective reporters like Chuck Todd made the same observation.
It's true. It's true. So it must be true.
It must be true, yeah.
Once again, the doubters were very wrong. You might have heard, why isn't he out there more? Why isn't he front and center on this? That's going to make us lose the deal. If it sounds familiar, all of that doubting, it should. Here are a few headlines around the negotiations leading up to the infrastructure deal. Quote, the bipartisan infrastructure deal is probably doomed, alas. Quote, Biden's agenda remains unrealized as Democrats fail to close deal again.
Those media naysayers, as exemplified by two headlines, doubted Joe Biden's ability to get it done. What they didn't count on, what they didn't factor in is his genius in saying, you know what? Yeah, let's keep the military budget at this obscene level. Let's cut food aid for low-income people. You know, that's what these liberal naysayers didn't see. Yeah, that Joe can cut social programs just like Republicans do.
Because he's a genius.
Yes.
There was a decision made in the fall of 2021 when I was still in the White House working with that team that the strategy was to be quiet, that sharing every detail of a deal-making process, that making it into a big circus was not just a big mistake, but made it far less likely to happen. Because guess what? The biggest deals and the most important conversations often happen off camera.
Wow. This is just some mind-blowing insights here.
I know. So I'm so glad we have someone who worked on the campaign, because without knowing that, without that insight, we'd never know this. So we thought negotiations were totally public.
Yeah. So basically, politics is not doing anything in public, not maybe mobilizing people around issues that impact their lives, like say, food stamps, and instead making secret handshake deals with Republicans in back rooms and not saying anything, not in keeping the public in the dark. It sounds really exciting.
Because he's a genius.
Yes. All right. Do you think we've had enough?
It's also interesting because, it has to be behind closed doors, because this isn't really like, she's basically saying that democracy was saved by this amazing negotiator. But of course, the process was not democratic, because not only is it lacking in transparency, but also none of these things are things that people care about. Like, American voters don't want actually to punish poor people. They don't want students who have to pay back their debts to be punished. They don't want, their priority is not raising the debt ceiling either. But let's just watch a little bit more.
It's a part of the Biden philosophy and a central part of the strategy that, by the way, has led to a lot of deals being made. Being underestimated isn't always a bad thing either. It has given the president a bit of a healthy chip on his shoulder to prove people wrong over and over again. And it isn't just his policymaking style. It's also his political skill that people undervalue. Remember these headlines? When will basement Biden get in the game? Does Biden need a higher gear? Some Democrats think so. Those aren't from recent months. Those are from the weeks before Joe Biden won the presidency and defeated Donald Trump. Or how about these from the weeks before the midterm election? Why Biden...
I like the idea that everything now is retroactively wrong because he made a deal that was bipartisan. So the fact that he was hiding in his basement is now a good thing. It was all part of a plan that we underestimated him over.
It's so important that we have a news show that can remind news outlets of times when they doubted the president and shouldn't have criticized him.
Right.
That was like settling scores. Like, remember 3 years ago,
right,
when this headline said this mean thing about our president? Well, guess what? They're wrong because 3 years later, he reached a handshake deal with Kevin McCarthy.
Right. Yeah. You remember? Yeah, I'm waiting for her to spin. You know how he fell the other day? She's like, I can't believe people were talking about that. They clearly underestimated his fall. That was all part of the plan. That's how he does politics. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, let's see what else.
Biden's closing argument worries some Democrats and could miss the mark with midterm voters. Help or hindrance, Biden takes a back seat as Trump goes all in on midterms. We all remember how that turned out. Democrats kept the Senate and nearly kept the House. Call me crazy, but maybe, just maybe, he is onto something here. Maybe people don't want a frenetic Twitter president. Maybe they don't want a circus. Maybe getting things done isn't boring and isn't as vanilla as some recent analysis has suggested. Maybe government...
Vanilla, that's an interesting choice of words.
Governing is about making people's lives better, or trying to. Maybe you don't have to litigate everything in public in order for progress to be made. So in my experience from working for him for nearly 2 years, it's not really a problem for Joe Biden that he's underestimated. It's kind of a motivator for him. But the big lesson from this week isn't about the future of bipartisan deal making. Don't hold your breath on that. It's that people should underestimate President Biden at their own peril.
Dun, dun, dun.
Wow. Well, that was so insightful.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, Biden's former spokesperson, for telling us how great Joe Biden is and why we should not doubt him. Yes.
Right. Who would have? I'm so glad we had that insider's view from working for him for 2 years. That's the takeaway. She should write a tell-all about how underestimated he is.
It's a great thing we don't have state media in this country.
Yeah, seriously.
Totally free. Okay. For a different take, let's go to Congressmember Garrett Graves. He's a Republican. He is happy with the deal, but also he thinks that Joe Biden lost.
Right. Maybe he's underestimating
Democrats and more Democrats than Republicans actually voted for the deal that you negotiated, and it leaves largely intact most of the president's economic agenda. How can you claim, as you told my CBS colleague the other day, that the White House got schooled?
Because the White House laid down about 7 red lines, including that they wouldn't negotiate, that they wouldn't allow anything to be done on work requirements, that they wouldn't allow any changes to environmental laws, that they wouldn't allow us to take any funds from IRS agents, and on and on. And yet,
look how happy he is with all these terrible things that were just inflicted onto the American people. He looks like a sadist. Also, he has to put some, I don't mean to be superficial, but he needs some powder. I say that as a friend. I put powder on my forehead myself. Okay.
Every single red line that they laid down, we crossed right over in negotiations, resulting in the largest savings in any legislation in the history of the Congress. This was a huge accomplishment, huge legislative wins. And lastly, Margaret, I think when you look at the president's statements, all he could do is talk about things that didn't happen versus anything that did happen that was positive for his agenda.
It's kind of true.
And yet nobody, in all these clips that we reviewed, I didn't hear anyone say we made it harder for working people to get access to food aid.
No.
It's like that's one of the core provisions, but for these people, it just doesn't exist because they don't care about the recipients. They don't care about the people that it impacts.
Well, they always like to say you have to teach people to learn to balance their budget.
Right. Yes.
They're just helping these people be financially responsible.
Well, one area where we don't need to worry about the budget and being financially responsible is Ukraine, because when it comes to fighting a proxy war with Russia, there's an endless pool of money that we can draw on. And the U.S. just committed another $300 million. And right now, Ukraine is, getting underway, this long hyped counteroffensive. And so the Ukraine ambassador to the U.S. has some comments on it.
And by the way, before we play this, I just forgot to mention this, which is that all of this is such a joke because, the Democrats during their lame duck session could have passed a debt ceiling raise through reconciliation, and they didn't. And people ranging from Bernie Sanders to Janet Yellen, for crying out loud, were saying that they should. So all this talk of how close it got, the Democrats didn't use their power. And if this was such a potential disaster, they could have done that, or they could have used the 14th Amendment about, not questioning the credit, basically. So this is all, as we keep saying, this is all political theater, but which makes it's an important backdrop to what we're going to see next.
Said we are ready. Russia, though, throughout the
hold on,
and your president said we are ready. Russia, though, throughout the course of the week has been launching missile attacks, including on the capital of Kyiv. They appear to be testing your air defenses. And I know President Zelensky has said Ukraine needs more Patriot missiles. Are you getting help getting that kind of air defense right now?
Well,
is the U.S. doing enough?
We're very grateful for everything we're receiving. So it's Patriots, it's NASAMS, it's all other capabilities, but we clearly need more. So what Russians have been doing, again, for 466 days now, but also this week, we have seen how daily, several times a day, there were deadly attacks by rockets, but also Shahid drones all the time. So it's the terror, it's the destruction that it brings, but also it's the, expanding our capabilities that we have now. We definitely need more.
The Biden administration released another $300 million in military aid. Some of that included drones. Are these surveillance drones? Are these attack drones that the U.S. is giving?
It's a range of the drones. So, and we need all of them. We need the surveillance, we need the attack drones, we need the kamikaze drones. So there will be different capabilities in the packages.
So, Ukraine's in a tough spot here because the U.S. has flooded them with weapons, but they do need more. They do need more Patriots. The U.S. is not giving Ukraine the Patriot missiles because it wants them, because the U.S. needs it for itself in case, for example, gets into a war with China. So, sorry, Ukraine. That's the U.S. attitude, basically.
Right.
And, of course, looming in the background here is the outright refusal of the U.S. to even entertain a ceasefire. Antony Blinken, the top U.S. diplomat, Secretary of State, has repeatedly said that a ceasefire is out of the question, and they just want to sacrifice as many Ukrainians as they can before this thing has to end, because they want to bleed Russia as much as possible. That's the aim of the U.S., not to defend Ukraine, it's to bleed Russia. So that's why Ukraine's being sent into now this new phase of this proxy war. And again, not even discussed is how about maybe some kind of peace deal or some ceasefire. That's not on the table right now. So
right. It's so funny though, because it's so humiliating the way the U.S. and the media make the Ukrainians basically beg in public every few weeks. The U.S. knows what they're saying that they need, and they don't care about having public support for it. So why do they trot out these people regularly and make them get on their knees and ask for something?
Yeah. And even the super hawkish Republicans and some Ukrainians too will say, why are you drip feeding us these weapons? Why can't you give them to us now all at once? How come, every few months we have to go through this thing where now you give us a weapon system that you wouldn't before, right? It happened with the tanks, with F-16s, and many others. And the reason is because the strategy from the U.S. point of view is just to prolong the war for as long as possible, just to slow roll it so that you can bleed Russians for as long as possible. That's why, Lindsey Graham said recently that it's the best money we've ever spent because we're killing Russians. Right. So that's the point. It's not to help Ukraine defend itself. It's just to prolong this for as long as possible, because that will, in the eyes of the U.S., weaken Russia for as much as possible. So, and Ukraine's caught in the middle, and the Ukrainian government under Zelensky has chosen to go along with it. So that's why we're in this dynamic. And, on that topic, that's why the U.S. won't allow Ukraine into NATO, even though it promised Ukraine NATO membership back in 2008, because the point is to continue dangling it the possibility of NATO membership just to provoke Russia and make sure that no settlement can be reached, because one of Russia's core demands is no NATO for Ukraine. And the U.S. doesn't want to give NATO to Ukraine because they want to dangle that prospect to keep the war going. And because they know that if Ukraine joins NATO now, that would force NATO into a direct war with Russia. And the U.S. doesn't want to fight Russia. They want to use Ukrainians to weaken Russia. So that's why this goes on. And so, but here's the ambassador talking about that.
Upcoming NATO meeting in July that President Biden is expected to attend, and Ukraine's possible entry into the military alliance is a topic there. Do you know what the U.S. is going to promise?
Well, we all look forward to this summit. Ukraine has NATO aspirations, transatlantic aspirations
for some time now.
In our hearts, in our constitution, and the majority of people support it since 2008, when the first declaration was made that we will be members of NATO. We believe it's time to start discussing some specific steps in that regard. Now, again, as President Zelensky said, we are realists. We understand the limitations that the ongoing war puts to it. But I think at this moment, after this horrible violation of international law, after Russia attacked us completely not provoked when we were not part of NATO, after historic decisions on Finland and Sweden, it's time for everyone to realize that it's about good versus evil. And we need to be members of NATO as much as NATO needs Ukraine also in order, because we have a lot to add to NATO. So yes, we look forward.
I mean, unfortunately, it's just not true. Ukraine is massively corrupt. It's now currently at war. It has nothing to offer NATO. Its only use to NATO is to provoke Russia, which has been the purpose of U.S. policy in Ukraine for a long time now. That's why Ukraine was promised NATO membership back in 2008, but never granted it, because the aim here is not to bring Ukraine into NATO. It's just to use Ukraine to provoke Russia. And by the way, if you look at polls in Ukraine, they remain divided over this issue. Even after Russia invaded Ukraine, there's still a large percentage of the population that is not on board with NATO membership. There's still a lot of people who just favor neutrality, not being a part of any military alliance. And that's been a problem for a long time, is that you have a deeply divided country, but we're not supposed to acknowledge the parts of Ukraine that don't want to be a part of NATO. And so this farce just keeps being played out, rather than talk about some sort of permanent arrangement that could end war. The U.S. plan now is basically, even if there's a halt to the war now, it's just perpetual conflict. That's why Ukraine's being armed to the teeth for future conflicts too. The plan is no matter what happens now, is for this to go on for many, many years.
Right.
And by the way, and she says unprovoked. I mean,
yeah,
we don't have to go through that, but it's just not true. You don't have to justify the war, what Russia did. But again, there was the promise of NATO. There was the war in the Donbass that preceded this invasion that was going on for 8 years that Ukraine refused to end, even though they signed the Minsk Accords. And there was the fact the U.S. has these missile systems in Poland and Romania that are aimed at Russia. And Russia wanted to address all this. And we saw the U.S. wouldn't talk about any of these core demands that Russia had. So that's why we have this war. And the refusal to still talk about any of these core demands is why this war is going on, is continuing.
Well, it's so great that we have responsible journalists like the ones that we see today who say, "Oh no, it wasn't unprovoked."
Of course, I mean, if you're talking about the war in the U.S., you have to say it was unprovoked. You can't mention any of the background that I just mentioned. It just doesn't exist.
And again, it's not that hard to do this. Like, it really isn't that hard to do this. To say it was provoked, it was preventable, and it's not justifiable. That moral diagnosis is not difficult.
Sure. Yeah. Sure. Yeah. And meanwhile, you have this weird thing where the only people who will sometimes acknowledge that maybe we can have diplomacy are people inside the Republican Party, because their base very much holds that view. So you're seeing candidates like Trump, and now this other candidate, Vivek Ramaswamy, saying the same thing, that why not have some diplomacy? So here he is speaking to Martha Raddatz of ABC, who can't really process what he's saying, because diplomacy with Russia, that just doesn't compute in the corporate media.
Yeah, watch her face. It's amazing.
About Ukraine, you said in a speech in New Hampshire on Friday that you would not spend another dime of American money on a war that does not affect our interests. You don't think the possibility of Russia taking over Ukraine is in our interest?
I don't think that's a top foreign policy priority. But I did also in that same speech identify what is our top priority.
I want to stick to this for a minute. You do not believe that Russia taking over Ukraine would be bad for our national interest?
I do not think it is a top foreign policy priority for us. I don't think it is preferable for Russia.
Do you want to know who said the same thing? That having a war with Russia over a border dispute in eastern Ukraine, because it's not about Russia taking over Ukraine. Russia doesn't want to take over Ukraine. Russia has wanted respect for the cultural rights of Ukrainians to identify with Russia who live in the Donbass for 8 years. That was basically the bargain of the Minsk Accords, which Ukraine signed but refused to implement. So that's Russia's demand. And Russia wants control of Crimea, which historically has been a part of Russia, which Russia seized in 2014 after a U.S.-backed coup. But you know who said that it's not international interest to have a war with Russia over this? Is Barack Obama.
Right.
He said when he left office, he told Jeffrey Goldberg that if someone in this town thinks we should go to war with Russia over eastern Ukraine and Crimea, they should stand up and say it. He says this is not in our national interest. And that's why it's foolish to have a war with Russia, because this is in their national interest. This is on their border in areas that are historically part of Russia, where many ethnic Russian Ukrainians live. So this was once a mainstream Democratic Party message, as exemplified by President Obama saying it. Now it's a fringe message that only a Republican could dare possibly embrace. But that's how weird our political spectrum has gotten.
So Obama did that thing where he was like at a wedding, like, if anyone objects, speak now, stand up, forever hold your peace. And then no one, it took a couple of years for people to all get up and say, yeah, we don't want this wedding to happen. We want to arm Ukraine and further proxy war.
And Lindsey Graham and Joe Biden and the squad and the entire establishment media, they all got up at the wedding and objected all together.
Yeah. And they ruined a stable. They fomented a brutal, very violent annulment to carry on the metaphor. Yeah,
absolutely.
To be able to invade a sovereign country that it's its neighbor. But I think the job of the U.S. president is to look after American interests. And what I think the number one threat to the U.S. military is right now, our top military threat, is the Sino-Russian alliance. I think that by fighting further in Russia, by further arming Ukraine, we are driving Russia into China's hands. And that Sino-Russian alliance is the top threat we faced. And what I've said is I would end this war in return for pulling Putin out of that treaty with China.
How do you do this? No one tells Vladimir Putin what to do. That has not worked yet. And you said...
Nobody puts baby in a corner.
And nobody puts Vlad in a corner, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and this is where the Republicans, this is where they're coming from, is they just hate China, and they don't like the idea of Russia and China having ties. Right. So this is really, they're like, all right, we can't go after both of them, so let's take Russia off the table so we can go after China. That's pretty much where they're coming from here.
Right, because as Chuck Todd likes to remind us, the most bipartisan popular position is to fear and vilify China.
That's right.
Yeah.
You would want to give him the Donbass. That would be rewarding Putin, wouldn't it?
I don't trust Putin, but I do trust Putin to follow his self-interest. I don't think he enjoys being the little brother in the relationship with Xi Jinping. And so what I think we need to do is end the Ukraine war on peaceful terms that, yes, do make some major concessions to Russia, including freezing the current lines of control in a Korean War-style armistice agreement.
Ukraine really wouldn't want to do.
Which Ukraine wouldn't want to do, and also a permanent commitment not to allow Ukraine to enter NATO.
Again, it's such a silly conversation because, again, all Ukraine had to do was simply just respect the accord it signed, which is called the Minsk Accords. And that would have kept Ukraine's borders intact, with the exception of Crimea, which Russia has seized and is not giving back. But it just would have meant respecting the cultural rights of Russian-speaking Ukrainians and telling far-right Nazis and far-right nationalists that, sorry, like, we're going to have to respect the rights of these Ukrainians who happen to identify with Russia. That's basically what Minsk was about. But the far-right in Ukraine couldn't abide by that, and they were enabled by the entire Washington establishment, who joined up with them to prevent the implementation of the Minsk Accord. So now we're in the situation where, yeah, okay, Russia's escalated and now wants to take those territories where those Ukrainians live. And the answer, I think, I mean, if you really cared about what the people of the Donbass believe, why not support having a referendum and let them decide? That to me is what the solution is. But that's not on the table because no one's interested really in what the people of the region actually want.
Well, and also as you pointed out, the late Stephen Cohen made the point that if the West would have really had to have had Zelensky's back as a peace president, but in order to counterbalance the disproportionately powerful extreme right wing, Azov battalion types who were pressuring Zelensky to not comply with the Minsk Accords.
It's a great point. All that would have to be done is for Zelensky to be allowed to implement his own election mandate when he won in 2019 on a campaign of peace. If he'd have been allowed to do that, we wouldn't be in this situation today. That's what it comes down to. All right, we can move on. Remember when everyone was obsessed with documents for a couple weeks?
We got some doc talk. Yeah,
we got some doc talk. This is a former Trump attorney speaking about the issue that Chuck Todd loves and no one else cares about, because who cares about documents? But some people do. So here, his name is Tim Parlator.
Yeah, cool name.
Parlator. Tim Parlator.
Yeah.
Be surprised if the former president isn't charged with something here? No, not at all.
Hold on.
Not at all. I think that this is a case
we have to make sure we play from the beginning. Hold
on. Would you be surprised if the former president isn't charged with something here? No, not at all. Not at all. I think that this.
Oh, I'm sorry. I need to pause this because TLD pointed this out, asked me by name to bring down the hammer. We have 1,679 people watching and 760 likes. That is terrible. Not even half. We are about to bring you some doc talk. If you want doc talk, you gotta give a thumbs up. Guys, honestly, today is more important than ever when we have this amazingly important Chuck Todd related news that we'll get to at the end, but we're only going to get to it if we get the likes. So where are we on likes now? And thank you, TTLD, for your patriotism.
I see 877. And please, people, I really want some doc talk. That's the whole reason I got up this morning is for Chuck Todd doc talk.
We should get at least to 900. I really should demand 1,000, but I'm being generous today.
It's kind of like from Arrested Development, Bob Blah Blah's Law Blog, Chuck Todd's doc talk.
Oh, yeah. Where are we at now? 909. All right.
928. We're almost there. Everybody wants it.
Yeah.
It's our last Chuck Todd summer.
Yeah.
It's a Chuck Todd summer.
Yeah. All right. Hopefully by the end we'll get to 1,000. All right, let's go back to doc talk.
This is a case where you have to evaluate every case based on what are the facts in the law and is it something that's provable. But then there's also all of the other atmospherics of, is this something that from a discretion point of view, is this something where a prosecution makes sense? Is it something?
All right, listen, it's just too boring. The doc talk is just too it can't be listened to. It's such a boring topic. And thank God it's really been pushed out of the news cycle,
right? At
least the front of it, because man, oh man, that was a rough time.
The only important thing about this is that Chuck Todd looks like an idiot during it. But
really,
yeah.
All right.
Where it is a slam dunk case, where some of these things could be interpreted a few different ways, And also, when it comes to a specific issue like this, where we are talking about potentially national defense information, is it the type of thing where they want to...
I'll say this. The interesting thing that emerged from all this was that Trump reportedly had a document that was given to him that was a plan to basically invade Iran. And I think Trump was trying to say that, like, I'm not crazy enough to invade Iran. He was trying to use it to diss Mark Milley. And Mark Milley said, I didn't want to invade Iran. And so there's kind of a little dispute there. That's kind of interesting. But they're not talking about that. They're talking about markings and blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So we're going to move on because Doc Talk, it's just too boring. But
maybe we'll do a retrospective when Chuck is no longer with us. We'll go back to that to honor him.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of honor, here's Joe Manchin with some comments about politics, which he says is not honorable, which is an interesting slip. Here he is.
Interesting to me that in many of these bills that you've been in the middle of, right, you've actually been working with Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell and Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer. Are you surprised Mitch McConnell spending so much of his political activity trying to convince you not to run for re-election? Does that make it harder to work with Republicans?
It doesn't make it harder for me. I understand this is not the most honorable profession. It's a shame to say that, and it's supposed to be the most honorable profession when you can provide services to the people that you represent.
And Joe Manchin does not want to provide services to the people he represents. He is a opponent of social spending. He does want to provide pipelines. That is true, which will enrich his energy industry donors. But I wouldn't call him Mr. Services. But I like his honesty. This is not an honorable profession.
Yeah.
Yes, and you're a good example of it, Joe.
Yeah, he should go to like job fairs and tell people not to become politicians. It's a dishonorable profession. Yeah.
Okay. Let's move on to Jim Comey. He is somehow still treated as a serious figure. It recently came out from the Durham report looking into the origins of the Trump-Russia investigation that, that investigation was baseless. It should never have been launched. And Comey was one of the key people very active in keeping it going and in lying to the FISA court to get a surveillance warrant on a Trump campaign aide, Carter Page, based on the Steele dossier, which is funded by Hillary Clinton, and hiding that from the FISA court. Comey was in the middle of all this, but yet he still got stuff to say.
Right.
And
I'm sure he'll be taken to task for that, right?
Oh, yeah. So here he is warning about the possibility of Trump coming back to power.
That Trump poses a near existential threat to the rule of law. And this is something, similar language that I hear privately from national security officials, some people you and I both know, who will say this privately about what a second term could mean. But tell me a little bit about the specifics of what he could try to do. What do you mean by that?
Well, think about what 4 years of a retribution presidency might look like. He could order the investigation and prosecution of individuals who he sees as enemies. I'm sure I'm on the enemies list.
So look, all true, fair criticism of what Trump might do. I'm not going to argue with that, but is the best messenger for that critique somebody who oversaw an investigation of his political enemy, someone he didn't like, as a Russian agent on baseless grounds? Right. That's who Jim Comey is. Like, Jim Comey oversaw really the most baseless investigation in, at that level, at least in U.S. history. They investigated Trump as a Russian asset based on concoctions, fabrications. I don't think Comey is the best messenger for this critique of Trump, however true and accurate it may be. And of course, he's not going to be held to account for that because the media played along with the Russiagate scam. So I don't know. Yeah. That's all we need to hear from Comey. But that just was, I think he needs to do a little bit of reflection there on going after your political enemies. Because
no, keep going. Finish your thought. Because what I'm going to say is, well, I just admire the casual, sporty look.
He's definitely got a sporty look now. Yeah, he's definitely got a sporty look. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen someone on one of these shows dressed like that.
Yeah, he's an interesting guy, Comey. He's certainly very unique. Okay. All right.
Also, quick announcement. So things are, I forgot to mention this. can I make a quick announcement related to my show?
Sure.
So we have a live taping with Brianna Joy Gray, and we just added, it was sold out, but we just added some tickets. So I'm putting that in the Eventbrite. And also, because some people have asked, I'll be doing a call-in. There's some weird changes going on with call-in. So we'll be doing a call-in. Wilson will put the link in there. But anyway, that's about it. I'm sorry to interrupt with that logistics.
Okay.
But
sure.
let's go on to the next clip.
Okay. So
let's see. What do we have time for right now? Do you want to do the?
We can skip ahead to clip 13, Wilson. Yeah, and then I think we can wrap the show after that.
Well, no, we have to go to the final announcement.
No,
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, so this is Congress member. I've never heard of her before, but she's a Republican, Anna Paulina Luna, and she has a proposal that I'm sorry, I have to get behind, because she wants to fine Adam Schiff $16 million. So here she is.
About how complicit and how hard it's been to get this message out there. I will credit this show and Fox for really doing right by the American people to provide a different perspective and show the truth on what's really happening in Washington. But, social media was really a problem. And up until recently with Twitter, we really were fighting with one hand behind our back. And I will speak to Adam Schiff. Maria, I have a privilege resolution that I'm bringing to the floor, and we are going to fine that man $16 million for using his position to lie to the American people and ultimately push something that not only destroyed our country, ripped us apart, but also too is responsible for almost, I believe, maybe even potentially permanently damaging foreign relations. He's a criminal. What he did was wrong. And Adam Schiff, you will be held accountable.
Wow.
So
Aaron,
yeah.
My question for you is, are you interning for this woman are you moving to Florida to start your internship, or is this going to be just online?
I mean, what she's doing is she's calling for holding Adam Schiff to account for pushing Russiagate, for reading the Steele dossier into the congressional record, for claiming he had seen secret evidence of collusion, and for doing all he could to criminalize diplomacy with Russia and put us into a proxy war with Russia and Ukraine. So, I probably don't agree with this Congress member on pretty much anything else, but fining Adam Schiff for $16 million, yes, I 100% endorse that proposal. I think it's a great call. Okay, and speaking of coming together with the right, we're gonna go back to Joe Manchin, because he loves to sound this message of that he's like the moderate center, he's the compromise between the extreme left and the extreme right. So here he is talking about that on Fox News. And
sorry, which number was that?
It's number 14.
I got to ask you about this. The No Labels political group continues to fund and organize. They're trying to get in all 50 states. They want to be on the ballot to run a third-party ticket. New York Times says that's got Democrats very upset and worried it's going to re-elect President Trump. And they say this: at the top of the list of potential candidates is Senator Joe Manchin III, the conservative West Virginia Democrat who has been a headache to his party and could bleed support from President Biden in areas crucial to his re-election. I always ask you, you have not ruled it off and taken it off the table. Is a third-party run still in the realm of possibilities?
Shannon, No Labels has been moving and pushing very hard the centrist middle, making common sense decisions. People that basically expect us to do our job and not put the political party ahead of the policy in our great country. That's what we've seen happening, and there's more noise and more extremism coming from the far left and far right. They've been pushing this middle. If the middle has pushed what we just saw happen, that was the middle pushing. So that's basically a movement where No Labels has been proposing for a long time, 10, 11, 12 years.
It sounds a lot like what Joe Manchin
basically
says,
has
too.
the voice.
So basically, the moderate middle, away from these extremes on the right and left, is
right, like
corporate power, serving the Pentagon.
Right.
And that's where really the compromise is. That's the message from Joe Manchin. And it reminded me this, like finding that moderate middle. It reminded me of a track that we heard many years ago that I think is newly relevant. I think really could be Joe Manchin's theme song, and also the theme song for this movement, this no labels movement.
Yeah.
And it came from a guy named Kid Rock.
Wow.
So I wanted to go back to this moment. Let's hear a
we do
brief
like
clip
to
from
provide
it.
soundtracks.
Yeah. This is an oldie but a goodie. So let's hit it.
I feel so helpless and confused, 'cause I hear screaming on the left, yelling on the right. I'm sitting in the middle trying to live my life, 'cause I can't stop the war. Shelter homeless, feed the poor. I can't walk on water. I can't save your sons and daughters. Well, I can't change the world and make things fair. The least that I can do, the least that I can do, the least that I can do is care.
So this is a song for anybody who doesn't want to help out their fellow citizens, doesn't want to take care of other people. It's, people who want to, do stuff like that. They're on the far left, and they're just as bad as those on the far right.
Right.
So the moderate place is people who can't, the lyric is like, I can't feed the poor. I can't stop the war. Well, the point is we could if we tried, right? But he doesn't want to do that. He just wants to sit in the middle and make a lot of money and ignore everybody else.
Right.
So I just was reminded when Joe Manchin was talking about the extreme left and extreme right that he already has a theme song for it from Kid Rock.
Yeah. They should go on tour together.
They really should. And Jon Stewart can join them because that was a Jon Stewart's
the Rally of Sanity,
infamous
the Rally for Sanity, the Restore Sanity, right? Yeah. Which also presented it as that's always so. I mean, whenever if only there was a radical left, that would be great.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah,
no kidding.
That was represented in the government. Yeah.
Well, someone else who might have the time to go on this tour pretty soon with Joe Manchin and Chuck and Kid Rock is a hero of the show, really the anchor of the show, the Chuckster. And we're going to close today with some sad news on that front. Chuck has an announcement to make.
Welcome back.
I hope you're all sitting down.
Welcome back. I have a personal announcement. While today is not my final show, this is going to be my final summer here at Meet the Press. It's been an amazing, nearly decade-long run. I'm really proud of what this team and I have built over the last decade, and frankly, the last 15 plus years that I've been here at NBC, which also includes my time as political director. I've loved so much of this job, helping to explain America to Washington and explain Washington to America. When I took over Meet the Press, it was a Sunday show.
Does he really think he's an intermediary who's explaining America to Washington? Hey, Joe Biden, let me give you a little a front row seat to America. I got my finger on the pulse of this country.
That had a lot of people questioning whether it could still have a place in the modern media space. Well, I think we've answered that question and then some. We've taken Meet the Press from a single Sunday show to a distinct and important political franchise. From our daily show, Meet the Press Now,
which got canceled, by the way, by MSNBC and moved to streaming.
Right.
So anyway,
but I had a moment. Yeah. Oh, by the way, we forgot to give Joe Manchin a shout out for identifying as mod cent. Remember? He mod cent identifies moderate centrist.
That's right. That's an oldie. Yeah, that's right.
That's an oldie. Yeah.
And he admonished people to just let him live his life as a mod cent.
Yeah. Why does he have to choose? Yeah.
Yeah. He rejected that binary.
Right. So and today I'm going to declare today mod cent visibility day.
Okay.
So we were derelict in not seeing him today. Yeah.
Magazine show, Meet the Press reports, to our newsletters and podcasts. We've successfully expanded what makes Meet the Press special on Sundays to make it special no matter the topic or where it airs or when it airs. That includes our annual Meet the Press Film Festival as well, which has somehow become one of the most important festivals for Oscar buzz and nominations for news-driven documentaries.
I like the way he says somehow. He's like, he can't believe it himself. He's like, I can't believe these shitty films are actually making it into the Oscars. Yeah.
And I somehow didn't know that Meet the Press had a film festival that was, creating
rocking the
Oscar
Oscars.
buzz.
Yeah.
I missed it somehow. I'm out of the loop, I guess.
Yeah. You're working on your book. You got your head down.
Oh, yeah.
But the key to survival of any of these incredible media entities, including here at Meet the Press, is for leaders not to overstay their welcome. I'd rather leave a little bit too soon than stay a tad bit too long. I've had 2 amazing professional chapters, and I already have plans for my next chapter, including some projects right here at NBC News that I've been very focused on. Among them, docuseries and some docudramas focused on trying to educate the public better, bridge our divides, and pierce our political bubbles. So while I may be leaving this chair, I'm still going to help NBC navigate and coach colleagues in this 2024 campaign season and beyond. But this is also an important time for me personally. I've let work consume me for nearly 30 years. I can't remember the last time I didn't wake up before 5 or 6 a.m. And as I've watched too many friends and family let work consume them before it was too late, I promised my family I wouldn't do that. And just as important, and this is what really makes me happy, I'm also ready to take a step back because I have so much confidence in the person whom I'm going to pass the baton to. She's somebody who's been ready for this for a long time. Kristen Welker. I've had the privilege of working with her from essentially her first day here in Washington.
Also, she proved that she was ready by pushing for a no-fly zone during that amazing press conference when everyone was asking about that. So, yeah.
And let me just say, she's the right person.
In Ukraine?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So there was that press conference where all these reporters were, just like badgering the White House for a no-fly zone, and so she was okay. Well,
she was part of that chorus.
That's encouraging. That's encouraging.
Yeah.
In the right moment. And for what it's worth, this is always how I hoped this would end for me, that I'd be passing the baton to her. And I'll officially do that in September. I'll be honest, though, I leave feeling concerned about this moment in history, but reassured by the standards we've set here. We didn't tolerate propagandists, and this network and program never will. But it doesn't mean sticking your head in the...
We didn't tolerate propagandists unless they were propagandizing for a war, in which case we were 100% on board.
Yeah.
And many other topics that solidified establishment power. Yeah, we're on board with that propaganda. Just not President Trump's when he is doing something crazy. Yes.
...saying either. If you ignore reality, you'll miss the biggest story. Being a real political journalist isn't about building a brand. It's about reporting what's happening and explaining.
It is about building a brand. You just told us how great your brand is. You have like a film festival.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
The Daily Show. You have tote bags. He was just bragging about that.
I also like the way he says leaders stand down. He sees himself as a leader. And then he talks about not like being in that chair. I think we should start calling him Chairman Todd.
Why it's happening and letting the public absorb the facts. If you do this job seeking popularity, you are doing this job incorrectly. I take the attacks from partisans as compliments, and I take the compliments from partisans with a grain of salt. The goal of this and every Meet the Press episode is to do all of the following in one informative hour. Make you mad, make you think, shake your head in disapproval, and nod your head in approval. If you do all of that in 1 hour of this show,
3 out of 4. I got 3 out of 4.
Me too.
I've never nodded in approval, but everything else, yes.
Yeah.
So not bad. Not bad.
He does know his audience. Yeah.
We've done our job. So again, this isn't goodbye, but know this. No matter who sits in this chair, if it's Sunday, it's Meet the Press.
Wow. Well, okay. Well, listen, that's the news, everybody. That's the news we all have to absorb going forward. Just taking a page out of Chuck's book. Even if Chuck Todd is not in the chair, Monday morning we'll go on too. We will have to. We will have to.
We're more important than ever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, guys,
right.
I'll be on call in for a little short update. And then we'll just see you this week, right? And you can, of course, always go to usefulidiots.substack.com, usefulidiots.locals.com. You can find us here on YouTube, find us here on Rumble, and we will see you next week, right?
That's right. Thanks, everybody, for watching. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. And
Bye.
see you at the live show with Brianna Joy Gray if you are in the tri-state area. We just added 20 tickets. So make your move, fam. All right. Bye. Everyone.